This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at the Atlantic Farms Medical Marijuana Dispensary of Portland, Maine, which is located right down the street from where I live and is known as being the medical marijuana dispensary that is also a gas station, where you can fill up your car and buy things like snacks and drinks alongside medical marijuana products. Check them out over at theatlanticfarms.com. That's theatlanticfarms.com. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Thursday, October 8th, 2020, and you're tuned in to episode 989 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. We return to the Green Mountain State today with some good news, as yesterday, Vermont Governor Phil Scott let Senate Bill 54 become law without his signature. Senate Bill 54 has been in the works for a good while now and was put through bicameral conference committee this summer during a special session of the Vermont legislature. The question of how Governor Scott would land on this was left up in the air until the very last minute, with his office announcing yesterday that Senate Bill 54 would not be vetoed or signed off on, but would rather just become law. This bill rounds out the 2018 legislative push to legalize adult use and is built around an effective tax rate of 20%. There are a number of social justice provisions, and the bill calls for the creation of a new regulatory oversight body to be called the Cannabis Control Commission. Kyle Yeager has a good and detailed write-up on this one if you need more details. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. We have another follow-up story today with a look at the legal cannabis sales for the month of September in Illinois, just as we examined those same numbers for August yesterday. This time we have stats directly from the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations showing that legal cannabis sales in September in Illinois were up over the previous month, with just under $68 million in sales being made, up from around $64 million in August. Regular listeners should know that this storyline is one we've been tracking closely as we watch how the legal industry fares in the wake of Trump's disastrous coronavirus pandemic reaction. Numbers like this seem to support the theory that our industry has some measure of protection against recession and overall bad economic times. I would definitely give this one a read if I were you. My home state of Maine grabs our final top story today with Penelope Overton at the Portland Press Herald picking up on news of a regulatory change at the state level that will allow legal marijuana companies to participate in a program promoting sustainable energy use that uses ratepayer fees to incentivize businesses to install more efficient gear and equipment. That means that cannabis cultivators, processors, and dispensaries can now apply and receive grants to help offset the costs of buying and installing things like solar panels and more efficient lighting. This one's another great step forward in the normalization of legal cannabis and is something that should be replicated all over the country. Nice work, Mainers. Those are the top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, the Atlantic Farms Medical Marijuana Dispensary of Portland, Maine, which is located right down the street from where I live and is known as being the medical cannabis dispensary that is also a gas station, where you can fill your car up and buy things like snacks and drinks alongside medical marijuana products. The Atlantic Farms is one of the best places in the Pine Tree State to get a full sampling of what our great state has to offer up for cannabis consumers, as the folks behind the Atlantic Farms place a lot of emphasis on working with a wide spectrum of local farmers and producers. And because the Atlantic Farms prides itself on being a place for everyone to find medical relief with the use of cannabis, their prices are always reasonable and affordable. And best of all, you can save some time when you visit by doubling up and getting some gas for your car. Learn more about the Atlantic Farms and browse their menu over at theatlanticfarms.com. And if you do stop in and say hello, make sure to tell them that I sent you. That's theatlanticfarms.com. All right, time for the Blitz. Bouncing back to Illinois, we have Governor Gov Pritzker announcing on Tuesday that he would soon be issuing more pardons to follow the more than 11,000 he's already made this year for people with cannabis-related charges on their records. Governor Pritzker broke the news on Twitter along with details for 7 new criminal justice principles that the state would pursue in order to, quote, build a more equitable justice system, unquote. Those 7 principles include eliminating the cash bail system, increasing accountability and punishment for police misconduct, and boosting opportunities for people to divert around jail time through rehabilitation programs. Another good one to toss into the bucket of stories to read in full. Multistate cannabis operator iAnthus Capital Holdings just received court approval for a corporate restructuring plan, about a week after that very same court turned it down. Ianthis has been working through some issues this year, including some controversy around its former CEO Hadley Ford, and is moving to restructure its corporate and capitalization books after failing to meet interest payments on loans earlier this spring. You can pop over to Marijuana Business Daily for a link through to the court order, which details how things will roll out for Ianthis. Activists in Oregon working to pass a ballot measure next month legalizing the therapeutic use of psilocybin mushrooms are running a new ad urging voters to back their efforts. The Yes on Psilocybin Therapy campaign features State Senator Dr. Elizabeth Steiner Hayward in their ad spot, which is now running across state media and which you can watch yourself over at Marijuana Moment. Julie Atchison at Green Market Report takes an interesting look at one of the challenges of doing legal medical marijuana business in Oklahoma, which is generally considered one of the easier states to get a marijuana business started in, with low barriers of entry for both entrepreneurs and patients. But the flip side of that situation is having so many dispensaries spread out throughout the state makes it difficult to distribute products on a wide scale. More than 7,000 marijuana business licenses have been approved by the state, and nearly 6% of the adult population has a medical card. This storyline has applications outside the state of Oklahoma, so maybe another one to think about reading in full, at least if distribution is in your business wheelhouse. The state of Arizona is making it a little easier for people who have consumed cannabis to become police officers. Previous to the new rule changes, the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board would disqualify people from becoming police officers if they've used marijuana in the 3 years prior to application, or if they've consumed it more than 20 times total in their lives. The new standard trims that window to just 2 years of previous use and removes entirely the restriction on how many total times a person can get high. So now, as long as you've not used in the previous 2 years, you can become a cop in Arizona. Jeff Smith at Marijuana Business Daily has a good piece up detailing how 5 multi-state cannabis operators have sold off various assets this year in order to respond to shifting business conditions. Highlighted in Jeff's piece are moves by Acreage Holdings, Harvest Health, MedMen, Vireo, and Forefront, which I should point out is helmed on the presidential level by our very own Chris Crane, a longtime host and regular on our weekly show, Marijuana Today. And finally for today, Marijuana Business Daily has some cannabis news of its own to report, as the company, which also does a fair amount of business throwing industry trade shows and conferences, just announced that their huge flagship event, the annual MJBizCon, which takes place in Las Vegas at the end of every year, is going all virtual this year, thanks to the coronavirus, which has killed, as of today, more than 212,000 Americans. We've been rolling out to this conference here at MJ Today Media every year, getting a very, very large house to record at, stay at, and hang out in. So this one is a personal bummer. The conference is shifting to a month-long online format, details of which you can read about over at Stockhouse. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, Atlantic Farms, and to our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.